Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First and foremost, thanks a lot for joining us after a 3-day navigation in the turbulent and distracting waters of PDSF. We're grateful that you decided to conclude your intellectual journey with us in the one and only roundtable dedicated to the Indo-Pacific. But let us go straight to the point, if I may say, for those who get it. We often speak of the Indo-Pacific in oceanic or continental terms, as if a strategy were played out only across immense distances. Sometimes history turns on oceans, but is decided over just a few nautical miles, choke points or straits. That truth has rarely felt more immediate than it does today. As we meet, the crisis around the Strait of Hormuz has reminded the world that a narrow waterway can shake energy markets, immobilize shipping, endanger crews, and send a strategic shock far beyond its own horizon. Thank you. When one strait is under pressure in the Gulf, every other strait suddenly appears in a different light, and nowhere more so than in Southeast Asia. For Asia, for Europe, and for the global economy, the Strait of Southeast Asia are not secondary corridors. They are vital arteries. They connect the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, the Middle East to East Asia. They are the geographic fulcrum of globalization. In calm times, they are commercial routes. In tense times, they become instruments of leverage. Chinese strategic thinking understood this long ago. In 2003, Hu Jintao voiced what would later become known as the Malacca dilemma, the fear that China's economic lifelines would be disrupted, constrained at sea by powers able to influence or control crucial maritime passages. But our discussion today is not only about the anxieties of great powers, namely elephants, like in our titles. It is also about the countries of Southeast Asia itself.
You hear me clearly?
I want to take the occasion to quote Secretary of Defense of the Philippines, Gilberto Teodoro. He said that it is their own responsibility to ensure that their countries are not collateral victims of the imbalances caused by superpowers, otherwise called elephants in our round table. They are sovereign actors, maritime actors, archipelagic actors, each with its own calculus, constraints, and room for maneuver. Their waters are not empty transit zones. They are political, security, and national spaces. So the real question is not whether the straits matter. They clearly do. The real question is this. In an age of sharpening rivalry, who shapes the strategic meaning of these waterways? External powers, projecting force, or the regional states whose geography gives them both exposure and agency? We are here to examine Southeast Asia's island chains and straits, not as lines on a chart, but as a living strategic reality, contested, indispensable, and increasingly central to the balance of power. And we are here to ask what happens when elephants fight in waters that are someone else's home. So I would like to welcome our panelists. So first, General Emmanuel Boiteau, Brigadier General Air Force. Emmanuel Boiteau currently heads the French military mission to the US Indo-PACOM.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
He has held senior operational and strategic positions in complex multinational settings.
Yeah, I can hear you.
He brings a practitioner's view of alliance dynamics and great power competition in the Indo-Pacific. Sitting next to him,
Can you hear me?
Dr. Christine Cabassé is a geographer, researcher with IRASEC, specializing in Southeast Asia. Her work explores how space, urbanization, and regional integration shape political and economic dynamics. She brings a grounded, field-informed perspective, she's been living in the area for a number of years, on how geography continues to structure strategic realities. And at the far end of our panel sits Gilang Kembara. He's a PhD candidate in international relations, political scientist at Lancaster University. His research focuses on regional order, strategic behavior, and great power competition in Southeast Asia. He offers both academic depth and a nuanced reading of regional political dynamics. And we have here together with us online, from Indonesia, Bapak Andi Wijayanto. So Bapak is sir in Indonesian. Andi Wijayanto is a leading Indonesian strategic thinker and former senior government advisor at top level, at presidential level. He has contributed directly to shaping Indonesia's strategic vision, including one very famous concept for those who know the era, the global maritime fulcrum concept. He brings a rare combination of policy, experience, and deep insight into Indonesia's strategic culture. So thank to the four of you for joining us today. And we've been trying through this panel to bring together four different perspectives: a senior general officer, geographer, academic in international relations, and a practitioner. But before we start off with 2 rounds of questions, I will ask you, General, to explain why France, in particular, has a say, is concerned with this question. What are the forces in the area? What is the French posture in the area? What does it matter to us?
Thanks a lot. Aloha, like we say in Hawaii. I'm very delighted to present you a perspective on Indo-Pacific challenges. Sorry in English, sorry for translators, sorry for your nap, your next nap during the 10 minutes coming. Yeah, I'm delighted because I was directing the Center for Aerospace Strategic Studies, one of the members of Academ during the creation of the PDSF first edition 24. So thanks to the PDSF for this organization. So you may be wondering why France is so interested in the Indo-Pacific region. First, as an Indo-Pacific nation, we must protect nearly 2 million citizens in the region. France has the second largest exclusive economic zone, EEZ, of the world, just after US, and 93% of our EEZ is in the Indo-Pacific. Different type of threats loom onto the nation of the region, orchestrated by competitors who do not share our values of a free and open Indo-Pacific. They carry out actions to discredit our presence and attempt to redefine the world order. The Indo-Pacific, according to French definition, extends from East Africa to West America. It's not only a geographical concept, it's above all a geopolitical concept. You can approach it by a through perspective, as 90% of global maritime trade, and therefore the international economy now, passes through this large area. So as an Indo-Pacific resident power, France is committed to contribute to diplomacy, partnerships, and alliances in strengthening regional stability. What's France's strategy regarding its interests? We have some slides, not easy to read from distance, but just to support, to explain our forces in the area. You know that just after publishing in July 25 a revision of our National Strategic Review, we updated the Indo-Pacific strategy just after President Macron was a keynote speaker of the Shangri-La Dialogue. First time to have a European head of state doing this keynote speaking, opening Shangri-La Dialogue. Our Indo-Pacific defense strategy sets out key objectives. First, to protect and reinforce the security of our overseas territories, population, and interest. To strengthen regional security through cooperation, and to promote and preserve the rule of law, which guarantees the principles of circulation and access to the commons. France, with its regional partners, contributing actively to the implementation of the European strategy. The European strategy was a lot inspired by the French one. We'll continue to promote the primacy of international law of order to combat the coercive maneuvers on transgression that threaten the world trade. As you can see on this slide, we have around 8,000 troops in the area during normal times, because due to Middle East we have a little bit more, because part of the troop of Djibouti and UAE are counted in this number of 8,000. And those permanent forces are able to respond immediately to emerging small crises with full autonomy. The exercises every year in exercises like Marara for Polynesia. It's a multilateral field exercise focused on building regional capacity in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Croix du Sud, another exercise led last year by New Caledonia, and it was engagement of 2,000 troops at 2,000 kilometers from New Caledonia, because a part of the exercise was in Wallis. It was an HADR scenario, but when you are able to send paratroopers 2,000 kilometers from home during 10 days, that shows as well that you are able to do many other things. The overseas permanent forces contribute directly to protect our nationals, territories, and easy resources, and strengthen the regional stability by contributing to the surveillance of our partners' EEZ, to fight against illegal fishing, illegal trafficking, piracy, and preservation of the environment. Just an example, since beginning of 26, we were able to seize 12 tons of cocaine, representing more than $1 billion money. We drop it at sea, we don't sell it after. And that's an example of the relevance of our capacity to intervene with shared intel from partners. We continue to modernize the capabilities in overseas territory, like you can read in the military planning law till 2027, with modernization of helicopters, modernization of maritime patrol aircraft, and with A400, who will be deployed permanently in the area. It will be really a game changer, because due to the tyranny of distances in the Pacific area, we definitely need a strategic airlift. Alongside commitments in North Atlantic, Europe, and the Middle East, France also deploys several strategic military assets in the Indo-Pacific. We continually demonstrate our ability to project forces over long distances in case of major crisis, and to help different partners strengthen their sovereignty and regional security. So we have bilateral exercise with India, for example, Varuna, Garuda. We have Garuda Guerrier in Indonesia, and some multilateral exercises like La Pérouse, Rimpak, Pitch Black. On the other slide, I will focus on Pegasus mission. So it's like a fighter bomber task force, able to demonstrate we can engage high-intensity warfare assets, and to bring with us some European nations, because the example of 24, we go westbound with Germany and Spain, on eastbound with the Brits. This is the red track there. So it's a good, despite the engagement we have everywhere, we are able to project very quickly some important power. We have as well the carrier strike group Charles de Gaulle last year with the Clemenceau mission. It was a long deployment and demonstration of capabilities. You have the track there. And one part of this deployment was high-intensity training with US carrier strike group in the Sea of Philippines. So this is really strategic signaling, because when you are training together, that's a part of deterrence to some competitors, to one of the elephants in the room, to say we are able to work together in case of. You have as well, next slide please, the Lapérouse exercise, so last year it was with the Carrier Strike Group. We bring 9 nations, many assets, 30 aircraft, and the aim is to demonstrate on a maritime security scenario that we can be on the 3 main straits of Indonesia, the choke points between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So it's as well a signal, because maritime security is a good way to bring together many partners. But in case of high-intensity crisis, it's a way to say we can be there with some partners on these important choke points. So 26 will be as well the opportunity for deployment. So we have 1,000 troops on the helicopter amphibious task group, the Jeanne d'Arc mission, going to do edition of Lapérouse, and then going to Philippines, except if there is another emergency on the track. We have still HADR exercises on RIMPAC, which is the biggest naval exercise in the world. So just if you want to keep in mind only one sentence, it's complementary of our permanent forces, able to intervene without any delay, and of quick reaction force we have from metropolitan France, able to commit very quickly. For the fighters, our objective, and we made the demonstration some years ago, 10 Rafale within 48 hours joining to Australia. I won't go very long on the next slide about the partnerships, but we have very type of different partnerships in the area. It's very important because even US can do things alone. So partnership is obviously very important, and the way for military to translate that is to work on interoperability with partners. So I will just give some words about US, because I am working in Indo-PACOM headquarters. And you know that US are still on the strategy of deterring China by deny on the first island chain. Indo-PACOM is commanding 400,000 troops from Hollywood to Bollywood. So it's 55% of humanity on Earth. So it's really their first command outside US. The national defense strategy is demanding a lot to the partners in front line. It's quite the same as in Europe. They say we will provide some critical but limited support. That means you are in front line. You have to develop resilience. You have to buy military equipments, maybe mostly US equipments. But for countries like Japan, Korea, and Philippines, and a part of Australia, they are requested by US to do more for defense. To conclude with this very unstable context, there is an important risk of miscalculation between the two elephants, between major powers, particularly in South China Sea. And there is no real Indo-Pacific security architecture. You may think in Europe it's complex between EU, NATO, and so on. But just imagine in Indo-Pacific, despite ASEAN centrality, there is no organization currently able to stop any rising crisis.
Thank you, General. So what I can retain from your points is that France is a middle power willing to contribute to a workable security architecture in the area, despite the complexities of the region. I will add some more complexities in your understanding of the region by asking Dr. Cabassé how the very specific geography in the area shapes strategy, and enduring constraints such as economic imperatives and the structuring role of supply chains constitute frameworks from which even the greatest power cannot fully escape. Could you elaborate on your vision of regional geography and its impact on security option, please?
Thank you, Captain Lacroix. And so to pick up on what was just said by the General, and to especially looking at Southeast Asia, I would like to highlight the importance of geography, not only because I'm a geographer, but because it matters a lot. When we talk about strength, about vulnerabilities, and about conflict, and especially as we can see at the moment with the Hormuz Strait and all the economical turmoil. So I will talk especially about seas and about straits, since they are some of the main Southeast Asian geographical features. Straits, as you mentioned already, Captain, are strategical artery because they are critical passage between two seas or between two lands, and it depends from what point of view you're looking at. And also, especially in Southeast Asia, where they're allowing the passage between two oceans, the Indian and the Pacific Ocean. So, as you can see on this map, usually I'm a geographer, usually I show things on the map, but I hope you know a bit of the area. So, as you can see on this map, the Southeast Asia is home to a vast maritime domain, and not only vast actually, but also very fragmented, with plenty of distinct seas and distinct lands. And this is especially this fragmentation that is a problem for China. And especially when we look at the first island chain, as we talked about, and further east, the second island chain. So anyway, Southeast Asia and the maritime domain is home to about 30 straits. There are much more than this, but let's say, okay, 30 straits. Indonesia being the world's largest archipelagic state, is home of the majority of the strait. So everybody knows, well, I hope you know Malacca Strait. This is really a famous strait, and this is really a major artery for all trade. So 40% of the total trade in the world is flowing there, and especially over 80% of all oil and gas shipments to China. But beside Malacca Strait, there are plenty of other straits, so I don't know, Sunda, Lombok, and we could talk up north, you know, about Luzon Strait, and this is really a strategic strait as well because it puts, this is on the northern tip of Philippines. I don't know if you may see something, but it puts the Philippines at a very close distance to Taiwan, 100 kilometers. And so you can understand from that geography that the Philippines are very involved and very vocal about maritime issue, and also especially about what we call the gray zones activity, China's gray zone activities, and especially if we talk about Taiwan invasion. And we could talk, this is not in Southeast Asia, but it's so close, closely related. We could talk about Luzon Strait. Sorry, not Luzon Strait, but about the, I lost the point. Taiwan Strait, yeah, this is also a major artery for about 50% of the world trade is flowing there. So economically speaking, this is really a strategic region, and you will understand that, or as a demonstration of it, you will see that the region is home to plenty of sea lanes that where there is an increasing number of activities, and this is the case of telecommunication cable. As you can see on this map, so out of the 600 submarine telecommunication cable worldwide, about half of them are converging to Southeast Asia. We could talk also about shipping industry. And we have almost the same map, by the way, and you see the main routes going from one ocean to the other, and they are all, I mean, almost all going through Southeast Asia also. But we could talk also about hydrocarbon pipelines or seabed exploration, or also of military purpose. But what is important to remind or to get in mind is that actually of all these infrastructure, very few of them are what we call national. Most of them are international. So this is why you really can understand how important is the state cooperation. So from this initial geographical pattern, we can understand how highly vulnerable is the region to any eventual economic disruption. A conflict between China and Taiwan would lead to a maritime traffic interruption with harsh consequences, as we can see today in Hormuz Strait. Except that, and I will come back to the first slide, except that in the case of Southeast Asia, as you can see, there are so many straits that this is really a strength for the region. So there are plenty of alternative maritime routes. Straits are also a strategic passage for submarines. And as you can see also on the first map, the first map, and you can see that the maritime domain is shared, let's say, between shallow waters on the western part and more in the eastern part, with areas and straits with, reaching great depth, 2,000 meters or even up to 5,000 meters. So this is very strategic for submarine, of course. And as our colleague François-Xavier Bonnet wrote it in an article in 2020, he was talking about the Spratlys in the South China Sea. And he said that research on bathymetry became really like a competition. It's very important to know something about bathymetry. And he said, especially for a submarine transit, and I quote him, since a nuclear-powered submarine equipped with ballistic missiles could well threaten a large part of the world. From what I just said, you can understand that there is an increasing number of submarines in the region. And also linked to that, you can understand that, I need to say that only some straits, I was talking about 30 straits, but only few of them actually are to be used by the submarines, that they can go through in a dive mode in a total safety. Only few of them. To add even more, I still have 2 minutes or? 2 minutes. To add even more complexity to the situation, we need to highlight the presence of a big number of narrow straits and enclosed and semi-enclosed seas. While one of the main characteristics of the strait is that they can be controlled by land, from the land. And this is really a point of vulnerability. And this is precisely because of this vulnerability that China came, you talked about that, Captain, came up with the concept of dilemma of Malacca and doing much effort to secure access to secondary routes. Last but not least, and I will almost finish, to get the full picture, well, at least to get a part of the full picture, we will need to talk about the archipelagic sea lanes for transiting in all that space, since all vessels and aircraft as well are submitted to the UNCLOS, so UNCLOS UN Convention for the Law of the Sea. So all vessels and aircraft are submitted to UNCLOS rules, and since also in a context where Indonesia, for instance, not for instance, this is really an archipelagic state, Indonesia declared north-south sea lanes, but not east-west, and this is a source of ambiguity and sometimes crispation. I leave it here.
Thank you very much indeed. So I would just like to pick up on a point that General Boiteau mentioned that you might not know, but there's been a port visit from the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle in Lombok, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And it's a truly historical event, actually, for Indonesia. I believe it's strategic signaling. So maybe one of our Indonesian panelists will like to bounce on that, but it calls into question the political posture of the countries in the area. And so that's a good transition to you, Paguilan. So we've heard from both General Boiteau and Dr. Cabasset that regional agency, namely its security architecture, is largely determined by material constraints, military calculations or miscalculations, and geography. Let us now introduce a new parameter, the own political personality of the countries in the place, and what are the political pathways and choices which also create frameworks that are difficult for regional actors to transcend. So from your perspective as an international relation theorist and informed local observer, even from a remote place in Lancaster now, how would you assess these political dynamics?
Thank you very much, Captain Lacroix. And before I start, I'd also like to extend my heartfelt thank you to your team and everyone to extend an invitation to myself to speak this afternoon in front of you, all the audience here, on a topic that's also very dear and also very pertinent on my research, and also to speak on this panel with such distinguished speakers. So to start my presentation, and I hope I'll try to be brief but also concise, I'll start to, my presentation is shaped on the question as to how do stakeholders in Southeast Asia, whether it's Southeast Asian countries, whether the great powers, the superpowers, can do to avoid the possible catastrophe that conflict would bring. And so to my next slide, please, I propose, as I like to pick up from the General's statement regarding the absence of a regional security architecture, and I'd like to propose a sort of a vision as to how such regional security architecture would look like. And I encompass here a concept of great power management from Barry Buzan and Tsui regarding how, if you can see here, the figure looks very much like a house for which the ceiling of that region, let's see this figure as that of Southeast Asia, where the ceiling encompasses the core norms of the international society that's being upheld in the region, which are being supported or propped up by powers, or in this case, great powers, the one that holds the responsibility and also the capacity to ensure that the ceiling does not come collapsing because of all these system-level pressures that you see on top of the ceiling, coming from pandemic, coming from wars, acts of terrorism, for the benefit of not just the great powers themselves, but also the powers that do not have the capacity by themselves to try and contain and support that system-level pressure, the order as indicated by the writing of lesser power there. And before I move on, I'd also like to quote, so I heard earlier this morning from the Lithuanian foreign minister in one of the sessions earlier when he mentioned that when the roof is leaking, it is the responsibility of the people in the building to fix it and not wait for it to collapse. So I think he was also encompassing this idea of how we manage the region and each other. So, and you can see that this relations between the great powers and the lesser powers, where the great powers derive legitimacy of their actions, is then encompasses called great power management. And on my next slide here, it also trying to nicely surmise the idea that despite the current situation where we do have superpower states like the United States, and possibly if you would consider China as one of the superpower states in the Indo-Pacific in the area, the development of the other powers within the region gives a position of the rise of the rest, that other countries in the Indo-Pacific or even in Southeast Asia do have the capacity and capability also to derive some responsibilities to ensure that the international order or the regional order stay put, as I mentioned in the figure earlier, and that this diffusion of power and responsibility to all the states mean that the superpowers the states that we consider superpowers are rendered weak because of all the powers that have been diffused to many other countries in the region. And then the system would now contain a range, many different countries of increasing formidable great and regional powers. You may think of ASEAN being one regional power, Indonesia, or maybe in Europeans' case, you also think of European Union and also France. So these are countries which has the capacity and responsibility to maintain the international order. And to move on to my next slide, going back to the figure again, I'd like to derive how do these pillars of these great power pillars anchor themselves? What are the drivers, and how do we maintain? How do we maintain that every great powers have that drive to work together, to manage themselves, and to understand how what responsibilities they have to confer to the other powers. And so I derived there the foundation, not this one, sorry, just before. Yes, this one. The foundation of the great power management, which are the means that underpin ideology and also shared interests between themselves. Here I posit three means. Number one, for example, the responsibility to uphold international norms and rules and regulations. UNCLOS being one, being that Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific is a vital artery, maritime artery, as Dr. Kabaset has mentioned. And also, for example, other international rules and regulations, such as the Geneva Convention. The second one being to maintain global economic governance. The fact that each and every one of us here are interconnected, interdependent economically. No shipping, no shopping, right? It's very hard to imagine what would happen if disruptions in maritime trade would happen due to conflict right now. But I think we've all seen how the dynamics from the war in Iran has caused in terms of petroleum prices and other commodities. So imagine that these responsibilities, the level, the free trade liberalization, ensure, for example, the EU and Indonesia has recently established a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. That's being one of those things that these two powers have agreed. The European Union has also agreed for the similar economic partnership agreement with Australia very recently. So these are just one of the other means that I'm talking about on how these powers can share their responsibility and how they can agree to ensure that the ceiling doesn't collapse. And lastly, how they should and could combat shared fate problems such as climate change, certainly, problems that are affecting each and every one of us wherever we live, wherever we are, terrorism and energy security being another one. And moving on to my next slide, I also posit challenges on the great power management, on this concept themselves. One of the challenges, this is the right one, is this one I quote from Barry Buzan. It's called state autism. And it is basically a situation where countries, states, government drive their policy, their reaction based more on the internal process of the state, such as due to party rivalries, pandering to public opinion, their own political self-interest, rather than on rational and fact-based assessment and engagement with other states. And these are rife in Southeast Asia. These are everywhere, not just in Southeast Asia, but across the world. And you can see some of the examples I posit here. Why do the wars, the Thai and Cambodian wars, kept dragging on? There are self-interests within both parties in Thai and also in Cambodia to try and keep this war going on and not to think about the effect of the overall region. Why did Indonesia join the Board of Peace? I have ample opinions there, but I know this is not the platform for me to talk about that. You can catch me another day for that discussion. And why do the South Korean president enact its short-lived martial law? There's this level of self-interest or self-preservation that may sometimes take over the state's policy, and then to forget about the overall greater good of the region and also the world. And to my next slide, the second challenges that I'd like to posit on this concept would be that we have to be very careful about the era, I'd say another era of great irresponsibles, where the great powers have weakened their level of legitimacy from the lesser powers because they failed to deliver the justice claims. They failed to do their jobs. They abuse their position they abuse their position by abusing their neighbors and failing to order relationships themselves. Now, abusing their neighbors, I think at this contemporary age, we can think of many examples, and some of the examples I listed there, right? If you're Canadian, if you're Mexican, if you're anyone from even in Southeast Asia, if you're Taiwanese or something, you would have known what it feels like to be abused by someone that would have the greater capacity and capability rather than yourself. And so this is something that I wouldn't say is on the horizon. I would say that it has already arrived. And this is something that we have to be very careful. My next slide, and I'll try to conclude here, is that the concept I put forward with great power management is something that I believe would be very relevant to try and keep the countries to basically not fight against each other, because they know that the situation or the adverse effect of conflict would be dire, and once a system collapsed in one region, it would be like a domino effect. You knock down Southeast Asia, it would go on and affect Europe, it would go on to affect North America, it would go on to affect the whole world. So it lends a sort of credence to try and do a self-reflection and think whether the action of my country, the government, does it serve only to the benefit of ourselves, or does it serve to the benefit of the others? However, I do understand that there are challenges and there are also pessimism on people to think about why does it have to be our responsibility? Why does it have to be my responsibility? Why do I have to step up? And these are maybe because, as I mentioned earlier, whether or not people, the governments or certain states are too engorged to their own interests, whether there is ideological rivalry between state, democracy versus authoritarianism. There's incompatible responsibility. As a democracy, I don't think I can work with authoritarianism and et cetera, and vice versa. And also possibility that arising new non-Western great powers may not have that same level of acceptance into the overall platform. And we've seen this happen in the late 19th century, for example, as an example of Japan. So the presidents are there, and it might appear again into the future. And to top it all off, to close off, maybe just one last question for all of us to consider based on this concept. It's up to us to consider whether we think about the raison de système, which is the need to respond to shared fates, or whether we still prefer or stick to the raison d'etat, which is of the state's own advantage, obsession, and interests. I'll stop there. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you very much, Pagilang. So what I take away is that basically the path to a shared vision for a security architecture we'll have to navigate between geography, military constraints, also political agendas, internal, sometimes state autism, and probably a new era of great responsible. But local powers, regional powers, have been trying to find a way to actually express their own personality in this. And I would like to turn to Pa Andy Wijayanto, who's now online with us. Thank you, Pa Andy. Thank you very much. We know it's very late for you, so we're very grateful for you to be with us. So in light of what has been discussed, what is your assessment as a distinguished practitioner and a key contributor to a concept intended to shape the policy of the world's largest archipelagic state, the global maritime fulcrum. Given these constraints, what are, in your view, the main criteria guiding Indonesia's strategic posture?
Okay, thank you for having me. It's almost midnight in Jakarta. So the question asks, what actually shaped Indonesia's strategic posture today, given our geography and, of course, the global maritime fulcrum concept. Indonesia does not just sit near the critical strait, it is the strait. Malacca, Sunda, Lombok, Makassar all run through Indonesia's sovereign territory, which is both an enormous asset but also enormous responsibility. The global maritime fulcrum was built on one core insight, that Indonesia had been thinking of itself as a land country with some coastline, when it should have been thinking of itself as a maritime civilization. And that shift in 2014 changes everything. What you build, what you protect, and what bargaining power you actually hold. Geography used to be enough on its own. Control the physical passage and you control the strategy. That is no longer true. Undersea cable running through Indonesian water now carry as much strategic weight as the shipping lane above them. And cyber threats can paralyze port system without a single shot fired. Indonesia is exposed on both fronts, and our current capabilities do not match that exposure. So actually three things actually drive Indonesia posture. Economic come first. Roughly 40% of global trade moves through our waters. So any strategic choice that disrupt that trade is politically impossible at home, regardless of its logic abroad. Second is our foreign policy doctrine, the Bebas Active, our independent and active foreign policy tradition. This is not just a slogan. It is a political boundary that no Indonesia president can cross, and it rules out subordination to any external power. Third is institutional pressure. Indonesia punches above its hard power weight by being active everywhere. We try to be active in ASEAN, the G20, BRICS, Indian Ocean Forum. As a middle power, that kind of presence is cost-effective influence, and we have consistently relied on it. Yeah, I will close my opening remark with that, and will be gladly answering the question from other audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa Andy. So we will keep you online, and I will start a first round of questions within our panel, and I will ask basically first General Boiteau. We're seeing that the strategic pathways for Southeast Asian countries are not easy to find to build a global common strategic architecture, security architecture. What are their options? Should they seek full strategic autonomy, pursue hedging strategies, that is deciding not to join a bloc, or align with one of the major blocs? And based on recent statements by US leaders and policymakers that we've heard throughout the media, expectations from the American side appears relatively well defined. So what are the key messages from the US that regional actors should consider when defining their strategic courses?
Yeah, from the US, they demand to partners more, like I said, and sometimes they request to clarify their military alliances regarding China as a main economic partner. Like Australia in 2020, you cannot have a main partner in economy in opposition with your partner for security and defense. So it's the reason why US ask Australians to choose between their history and their geography. But the position of the countries depend mainly, according to me, it's my personal opinion, about the level of confrontation. During So to sum up in French is l'océan Pacifique le restera-t-il longtemps? Impossible to translate this because Pacific is peaceful in English. So for some countries, for the smaller countries, like the Pacific Island countries, the PICs, they are pretty happy with the great power competition. They take the best offer. They don't. They take aid from everywhere, and they accept to have Chinese influence because it's not a big deal during peacetime. Even non-aligned or multi-aligned powers, regional powers or greater powers like India, the other elephant cornac in the Indian Ocean, they don't want to choose. And this makes a unique position for France because as a nuclear power, as we have overseas territories, we have strategic autonomy, we are important ally, but we are not aligned. So I refer to the speech of President Macron in Shangri-La explaining we need different alliances and so on. But our position is a good way because we maintain a kind of strategic ambiguity sometimes. But in case of confrontation, I think France can bring some flags. Like you said, the example of Indonesia is a very good one because we have a stopover of the Charles de Gaulle in Lombok port with a nuclear reactor. And this is not acceptable from US, but it was acceptable for France. So it's this kind of thing. And in time of confrontation, hopefully, we will bring some flags on the good side of the bipolar confrontation. Even the position of US regarding France in the Pacific, we are not targeted by the Colby Doctrine. If you see a doctrine from the Pentagon saying everybody should go home and defend yourself, France is not targeted, unlike UK, very targeted with that during the deployment of the UK Carrier Strike Group last year. Probably because we are seen as an Indo-Pacific power, and it's very clear for them. So our unique position, I think, is giving more advantages than difficulties in the area. And for security architecture, you see with Cambodia, Thailand border fighting that nobody was really able to stop that, and it's very difficult, even for a small crisis about border. It was France who designed this border, I think. But security architecture is very difficult to engage on that as well.
But from your words, I retain that actually France is more or less actively contributing to the definition of the security architecture. France is prompting countries into choices. As a middle power, we are maybe, I would say, a positive actor in that regard. And the US is calling for a clearer choice. I mean, Colby is asking for groups designed to contain China, and that is not, I would say, that is no good future for multilateralism. So I have a question for you, Paguilan. It's simple. In that context that we've just described, is there a future for multilateralism, or are we witnessing a shift towards minilateral arrangements together with middle powers or locally? And another question, can ASEAN centrality, a concept dear to Indonesia, endure in a context of intensifying great power competition? Will it last? Or are its member states likely to drift towards alignment at the end?
Thank you, Captain Lacroix. Multilateralism and ASEAN centrality. On the first question, and ever the optimist I'd like to be, I think the Parisian sunshine helped a bit. Yes, I do like to believe that there is still a future for multilateralism. And despite the introduction and the continued use of minilateralism, I find that there are rooms for both position for both multilateralism and minilateralism to work together. Now, as you can think about the figure of that great power management of that international order being supported by the great powers, I can try to think about how these minilateralisms and multilateralisms help to prop up and work together. So as long as they agree on the norms that they seek to support. Once there are differences in those norms, for example, human rights, one group believed in the traditional sense has been used for years. The other one would think human rights, but only for those who can pay, or something like that. Or maybe other certain levels of how to deal with several system pressures, such as pandemic. I believe with COVID-19, we saw there are different levels of treatment where countries who are proximity closer politically to certain states would have more advantages and all that stuff. So these are the challenges that may come if multilateralism and minilateralism differ on their perspective on how to prop up these the norms, on how they would define and agree on the norms. On the second one, regarding ASEAN centrality, again, I find that it's hard to imagine a system without ASEAN, or when ASEAN itself fails or continually fails to deliver. There have been criticisms, certainly, that ASEAN has not produced the level of outcome that people would expect it to be. Myanmar is one thing that's a big thorn in our shoes, in our road. The Thai and Cambodian conflict being another one. The South China Sea is, again, it's a very hard pill to swallow, but processes are ongoing. There are still confidence in that system. And for me, perhaps, on the level, on the context of ASEAN, if I may elaborate a little bit, is the concern that the countries may have differences between the elites and also the publics. So I don't want to go into very academic on this, but when the elites being the political enabler and the public being, the public being the enabler and the elites being the one that applied those policies, when there are disjuncture between the two, when the people think, oh, I don't want to be in ASEAN any longer, and the elites would think, well, ASEAN benefits. Now, if there's a disjuncture in that, I would press the alarm bell, I guess. So my advice, hopefully, is to ensure that there is still this ongoing synergy between the people and also the elites, the government and the people they govern, to believe that there is still a future for multilateralism and also for ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you. Your answer is clear. It's full of optimism, and that somehow it will survive in case of a major crisis. I would like to turn to Pa Andy again, because it's late in Indonesia. Thanks again for being here. In the event of a major crisis requiring clear alignment, what would be Indonesia's most likely course of action? What are the limits of what it can or not afford to do? More broadly, is strategic autonomy something reachable or simply a desirable objective? And if realistically attainable, is it within a relevant time frame in light of the rising rivalry? In other words, do you think you can still build your strategic autonomy, or that you will have to choose a side at some point?
Well, I think the honest answer depends on what kind of crisis we are talking about. If the US and China came into direct conflict, for example, over Taiwan, Indonesia would probably avoid taking side for as long as possible. This is not indecision. It is a rational calculation that picking a side early before the outcome is clear carries enormous cost with uncertain benefits. We would call for restraint through every multilateral channel, including ASEAN, and use that diplomatic activity as cover for quiet defensive preparation at home. So the one firm limit is that we would not allow our port, our territory, or our airspace to be used as a military base by either side. That will be politically fatal for any government in Jakarta, regardless of which power was asking. If, for example, energy route through the Gulf and our water were disruptive, then Indonesia would shift from bystander to directly affected party, and paradoxically, our non-aligned position will become more valuable, not less. A country that has refused to formally take sides retain the credibility to help broker a solution. And Indonesia has played that convener role before and will seek to play it again. If our own territory were directly threatened, however, the calculation will change entirely. We would resist and we would seek partners, including the United States, without requiring formal alliances as precondition. Bebas aktif prohibit submission, not cooperation. On the question of strategic autonomy, it is absolutely desirable, and it is embedded in who we are as a country. But if the question is whether full strategic autonomy is achievable within the next 10 years, my answer is no. Full autonomy requires the ability to impose real cost on anyone who try to coerce you through denial capability in our own water, economic resilience against external pressure, and credible defense investment. We are not there yet. What Indonesia can realistically achieve is the ability to choose, to make alignment decision based on our interest rather than our vulnerability. Yeah, we have to make everything clear that the strait, the choke point belong to us. The question is whether we have built enough capability to make that ownership count when a real crisis arrives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Indeed. That raises a last question on my side, at least, to Christine. You've been traveling the area a lot, and you've heard, I think, positive feedback on a third way. Do you think, because we're talking about constituencies, that is people at the grassroots being important to the decisions made by leaders, do you think it's a popular option that could be chosen by local leaders in the eyes of populations, local populations?
Yeah, thank you, Captain Lacroix. Yes, the third way is quite popular, but I would say also among the political elites, because as Pagilang mentioned, I mean, the confrontational behavior of the elephant, I mean, it brings a lot of uncertainty, and Southeast Asia's country don't like uncertainty. And that's why the third way, France's third way, is quite appealing to this country. And if you remember well, when AUKUS was signed in September 2021, Indonesia was among the most vocal Southeast Asian country against that move, especially because it didn't want to see, so many nuclear-powered submarine in its water. And so when we didn't see watch the picture, but okay, no problem. But so there are also some people right now are calling are pushing for AUKUS strategy, and also for the first fleet, etc. And this is one of the points of contention really for Indonesia. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go into detail, but this is still a point of contention for a number of countries, but specifically for Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Christine. We indeed are likely to lack time because we have the minister's speech at 1800, and I'm required to yield time. And you can stay in the room, and it will be broadcast directly from the amphitheater, so you can stay here and see her speech at 5 to 6. But before that, so it's very hard to conclude on such a panel, because what I take from all your intervention is that it's overly complex. It's actually much more complex than what I initially expected. We just had a chance to hear the voices of 4 different perspectives, as we said, a military, geographer, a political scientist, and a practitioner, local practitioner at top level. But they all brought a different way, different perspectives to read the same reality through operation, space, geography, theory, decision-making in real life. So this diversity of expertise is barely sufficient to grasp the full complexity of the region, so I must leave you with that. There is no final conclusion to the speech. But what we for sure must keep doing is work on that. So we probably have to go deeper in our interests for the Southeast Asian countries, noting that no single discipline, no single experience, nobody alone can claim to exhaust such a subject. So to identify convergences, divergences, and collectively refine our understanding of the region, it needs much more implication from Europe. So I think we can simply call for more interest from the European countries into this region, which is no less strategic than Hormuz. So I will leave you with this absence of definite conclusion and open the floor to your own questions. So please do not hesitate. You can add that in French if you wish. We'll try and translate. The floor is yours. To my right, the mic is coming. If you could briefly introduce yourself as well. Thank you very much. And also indicate to whom you're...
I am Vice Admiral Anne Culler from the French Navy, retired. And I would like to ask our foreign participants from ASEAN, what do you expect from France in the Indo-Pacific? If a crisis should arise, what do you expect from us? Thank you.
I'd put that question first maybe to you, Paendi, if you feel like answering that question. Paendi, do you hear us? So while Paendi is trying to recover the link, maybe Pagilang, who also has a local view on that.
Thank you very much for the question, Vice Admiral. Very short, but very, very difficult to answer. I'd like to believe that I'd like to speak from my own country, instead of the other nine ASEAN member states. But I'd like to believe that both Indonesia and France have the same perspectives, that we do not intend to see the world burns. So that would be the first thing that both Indonesia and France, or at least Indonesia would expect France as well, when both elephants start fighting, or when we see the first spark of fire, that we start to conduct. At the very first, we do understand that diplomacy is very key, that France and Indonesia have a very great responsibilities in the global platform, whether it's United Nations, whether it's G20, that we share various amount of platforms. And then on the other, below the political sphere, when we go into more operational, I do believe that the relationship that the Indonesian, both governments and also military have shared in the past couple of years should be, hopefully would be enough for both actors to respond on these possible crises in a rational way, in a way that it can ensure that we do not escalate the situation much further. And I positively believe in that sense as well. There is no benefit for Indonesia to escalate any possible conflicts any longer. Pak Andi has mentioned as well that unless it directly threatens our own national interests, then I believe there's nothing more. And perhaps on the very lowest one, and this is something that I also try to always promote as well, is that there, at this very stage, before crises do happen, but continued people-to-people exchange, understanding between the Indonesians and the French and vice versa, is the most potent and important political modality, not political modality, but modality, to ensure that we both understand each other, right? The elites may understand each other, the military may understand each other, but at the very, very bottom, but also very important, do the people understand? Do Indonesians understand the French? Do the French understand Indonesians? It would be very hard for me. I have my own opinion, but that's because I've known Captain Lacroix before. I've known Dr. Cabeza, now I know Jeannot. So I know I have my own experience, but I have 279 other million, brothers and sisters, and they have their own experience with the French. Thank you.
Payant, you would like to add anything to that?
Sure.
What do you
it's
expect
very,
from France?
It's very good question. I try to give you a straight answer. For us, France is not just a visitor to this region. Unlike most European countries, France actually live in the Indo-Pacific. It has territory in the Pacific and Indian Ocean, like New Caledonia and French Polynesia. It has troops permanently stationed in the region. So, and France, we know regularly send warship through the South China Sea. So when a crisis happens, France is already here, not flying in from Paris. So what we really evaluate in France foreign policy and behavior is during the AUKUS episode, when the US and UK cut France out of the Australia submarine deal. Paris just broke publicly from the American position without hesitation. That matters for us, for Indonesia, for ASEAN, because it means that there will be a respected third voice in the room that is neither US nor China. The biggest problem is the real France capability. France has real limits. France has only one aircraft carrier, one. It cannot sustain a long military campaign at this distance while also managing its other commitment closer to home. So for me, there is three things that we really hope France will commit in a crisis, and it is not really military firepower. It is three things. First, a seat at the UN Security Council. France, as a permanent member, can block resolutions that go against interests of Indonesia and interests of the other 9 members of 10 members now, including Timor-Leste at ASEAN, and try to coordinate with us to protect the regional interests. No other bilateral partner outside the 5 permanent member can really do that. Second, when the crisis escalated into open war, then we need defense equipment. So we hope we can find solution from France, defense equipment without string attached. France will sell Indonesia the Rafale jet, the submarine, the frigate, and now will not demand that Indonesia join a Western alliance in return. So this is a very clear and clean relationship for us. And the third is France can kind of mobilize European economic response. If a crisis hits commodity prices like the Hormuz problem right now, and it will put financial pressure on Jakarta, I think we hope that France can lead the EU in organizing support that give Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries a real economic buffer. So for me, the bottom line is France will show up. It will be possible. It will be feasible. It will be independent, and it will add a credible European voice that stop any crisis from being reduced to simply bipolar tension between America and China in this region. Yeah, thank you.
So that is really a third way, and I clearly understood your call for a second aircraft carrier for France. Thank you very much.